Well, we are back at the molding bench with a new project. These are stirrup strap holder parts for a 1920s Alan Herschell carousel horse that is undergoing a restoration. And I've been asked to help to provide an extra set of these because they've only got one set to go on one side of their horse. Now, when you're making sand molds, the two-part mold is made in a box like this. This would be one half. The other half fits flat against this, and this flat plane is the parting line of the mold. So the ideal case, you're molding a pattern that has a flat back that can sit on the parting plane. You'll notice that this is narrower than this. If it was the other way around, you couldn't mold it this way in sand because when you pulled it out, the part that was wider down here would break the sand out. So your simplest case is your flat back pattern. Oh gosh, I'm sorry. Is your flat back pattern. You know, if the part you're trying to cast does not have a flat back or any place you can really lie it flat, you can use a split pattern. Here's another example of a split pattern. But what happens if you're casting a part with an irregular parting line, or you're making a duplicate of an existing casting that obviously can't be split in half? So how do you mold something like this? It's not a split pattern and it's not flat against the molding board. The simplest way to do it is a technique called coping down. You lay them as flat as you can on the board like this, pack sand into it, and then once you flip the mold over, coping down is when you cut away the sand down to the parting line. Coping down in green sand is kind of a pain. It's crumbly and dries out the longer you take to make the mold. So I think I would like to use a follower piece to ram up with the pattern that can be pulled out and leave a perfect parting line without having to cope down in the final mold. I'm going to use plaster, but the problem is with water-based green sand, the plaster is going to soak in and pull up a layer of plaster-soaked lumpy sand with it. But I do have some of this kinetic sand. It's basically like Petrobond oil-bonded sand, but instead of using specially modified clay that absorbs oil and oil as the binder, it uses silly putty. Alright, I think that's pretty good. Let's see. Looks pretty good. Tricky part is, will I be able to release this? Might have to just pick at it a little to get it to release. Well, see, there's my follower. Comes out, it comes pretty close to the parting line. I might have to, cope down just a tiny bit, but it sure is going to be a lot easier than without this piece. touched up these parting lines with some putty, and I made this little flask. I'm just going to do a little test ram. That looks good. That went well. Huh. It's looking good. You can see that the parting line where I used the followers pulled perfectly clean. So I nailed the parting line on those things perfect. The inside of the one casting pulled a bit of sand. I got to pay extra attention to that area, I guess. Happy with that. Now we're ready to proceed to the next step. I got to gently pull out these followers to reveal the parting lines of the patterns, and then I can ram up the cope. Pretty good. Oh yeah. Perfect. You might be asking yourself, what the heck, Jeff? You missed with the sprue. But I didn't. You'll see why in a second. There we go. I saw it move. This is where I have to be super gentle. Alright, we'll go with this guy first. Ah, jumped. I tried to hold it back, but it jumped. Well, I made a little boo-boo, but it's not too bad. So now you're wondering, why is the sprue here and the runner's there? Has Jeff gone crazy? Jeff maybe has gone crazy, but that's not the reason. Jeff is casting a matchplate pattern. So this is how I line everything up on the molding board to cast this matchplate pattern. I traced the outlines of all these pieces. I got the big flask I'm going to cast the matchplate in. This is a scrap of drywall I'm going to use as a spacer between the cope and drag. And this is where the matchplate is going to go between two flasks built like this. So the pattern has to fall within a decent distance of these walls so I can cast it off the matchplate later. It'll all make sense by the end of the video. Now you see what I'm doing. The sprue comes out in here. This is actually a mold with no gating system. I'm going to be casting a big plate of aluminum that has this shape on the bottom and that shape on the top. Yep, it's all the way closed. I really hope it's not going to leak. I've got this board set up to set the mold on, and you'll notice that the back of the board is slightly elevated. The reason I tilted the mold slightly up away from the sprue like that is because with no gating system, the metal is just going to spread out in random directions from the bottom of the sprue. So I tilt it up a little bit. The metal is just going to collect at this end of the mold, and I'll have one front of molten metal advancing toward the other side, and hopefully I'll get a cleaner casting that way than if it just, you know, dashed out in all directions and then came back together in multiple places. It's not a SpaceX engine, but you know, I still like to make it as nice as possible because I want to use it as a pattern. A mold that has such a wide surface area of the cavity like this, you definitely want to put some weights on the cope to keep it from floating off and getting a run out. Hold the flask down, but it also helps the sand from breaking upwards. Oh. Oh. Let's see what we have in here. That actually held up better than I expected. Would you look at that? So I should just have to drill a hole in here and here to match up with the little flask with the pins on it. Ram this up and it's good to go. look pretty good. Yeah. So now I can use this to cast the actual parts in bronze. But I'm really hoping that this will make a nice casting. Because then I can make in as many more of them as I want, and the mold's only going to take a few minutes to ram up. Get this new flask all set up. So I'm going to sit like that for now. Got the match plate. And check it out, we're going to test this out today too. The pneumatic match plate vibrator. And alright, wait a minute. I should be ramming up the drag first. Alright, start this over again. This is my facing sand, so I get the finest finish I can get on these castings. Alright, that's enough facing. I'll go to my regular sand. Fresh out of the muller. Alright. Da-da-da! Would help if I had a sprue. Would also help if I had my spinner. Can't lay it on the flask this time because the sprue and the spinner pattern are in the way. Same thing there. Pouring basin about here. Make a little mark there. And I've marked on the flask where the patterns are, so I'm gonna vent that area. let any steam get out of the mold. I'm using a fine pointed venting wire so that if I do go right to the, you're not supposed to go right and touch the pattern, but if I do, it's just a tiny pinpoint. It shouldn't affect the surface of the casting. Not quite done here. Now we test out my prototype pneumatic Matchplate vibrator. Oh, looks like I can even reach it. Now this should vibrate the match plate so that it releases from the the sand easier. Wait a minute. Why don't I hear? There we go. Looking good. Alright, very nice. Tiny little bit of breakout right there. Not a big deal. And I need my air gun back. Alright, first I'm going to blow out this sprue. There we go. That did it. Just put a little radius on the leading edge of the sprue. Looking good. Alright, that's one ready to go. That seemed to go well. Really close to the edge of the box there, burning the wood a little. That's a heavy one. Ugh. Okay, this is the one I made using the followers and the original parts. Oh my, look at that. Pretty good. Yeah, they look good to me. So they look quite good. So this is the one I made from the original parts. The followers. Quite happy with that. Now here's the one I made with the Matchplate pattern. That's hot. Oh, they both look good to me. This is the one I made with the, I could tell because the pattern moved a little. It shifted in the mold while I was ramming it up and I had to clean up the skate. So this was the one I made with the followers, and this is the one I made with the Matchplate. And I gotta say, this one looks better. Well, here they all are. I decided that the keepers are going to actually both be the copies of the original castings, and there's a couple of reasons for that. One, they're just better castings. If I can get you up real close here, you can see I did fill in some of the little pits and porosity that came on my aluminum cast match plate, but I didn't get all of them. And you can see a few here. There's a little ding here, it comes from that. It's a little hard to see here, but you can see it there. These came through. But if you look at the original, the one cast off the original, the only real blemishes you can see on it are there and there, and those in fact are also present on the original casting. I suppose I could have tried to smooth those out, but I didn't want to mess with the original casting too much, any more than I had to. And hey, if the new one looks like it's had 100 years of wear and tear, then it's going to make a better, more convincing reproduction. So I was happier with that. These two, they came out about the same. The tricky part with these guys was this parting line in here. That was a bear to clean up. This one here, no, sorry, this one here, I didn't even have to touch these edges. There was zero flash on it. These here, not so much. I had to clean up all along these parting lines for that swing bar or whatever it's called. The only other thing to really look at here is this defect here from my match plate casting. There's actually two things going on here. One is this little fin of metal. Two is this breakout where the sand broke when I was drawing the pattern with the match plate out of the mold. Now if you remember when I was making the match plate, I had a similar breakout there. Now that might be a sign that my parting line is a little messed up and I need to do a little work on this match plate. Maybe I can fix that. If not, it's not so bad to have to grind that off. This flash here, this fin, I believe that comes from when I had to break out in the mold to cast the match plate, and I repaired it. I slicked this down a bit. You can even see it's smoother than the sand that I didn't disturb. And I must have compressed the sand a little bit, which would leave a gap in the mold made off the match plate that would get filled up with this thin fin of metal. Once again, it's not a big deal to clean that up, but it's not perfect. However, the job's done, and I'm not in a rush. Jeez, focus. The job's done, and I'm really not in a rush to fix it right now, because I don't know anyone else who has a 1918 Alan Herschell carousel horse that's missing a set of stirrup leather holders. If you do, drop me a comment or share my video with them, because I'm all geared up to make more if anyone needs some. Another reason why I got this breakout could possibly be that I ran the Quickie Vibe. I didn't run it for nearly as long when I was drawing the match plate out of the drag, which is the side that breakout happened on. I ran it a lot longer, removing the cope from the match plate, and that thing came off clean as a whistle. So it may have also been just I didn't rattle the mold long enough. Oh, one other thing, because this is a copy of a copy, and this is just a copy, this one's actually a little smaller. The aluminum would have shrunk a tiny bit, and then the casting off it would have shrunk a tiny bit, whereas this one's just a tiny bit smaller than that. This one's a tiny bit smaller than that. But can you really notice? I think either one would work fine on one of those horses.